Buenas and Hafaday, the Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We are on Bill number 346-36 LS, an act to amend sections 8502 and 8503 of Article 5, Chapter 8, Title 4 of the Guam Code annotated relative to the defined benefit one drive, and that is from Senator San Augustine. Senator San Augustine, I apologize, it's from Senator Terlahi and co-sponsored by Senator San Augustine and Senator Rangel. Senator Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to refer the amendment over to Senator San Augustine. And even with that, I want to include as co-sponsor Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Tony Blas, and Senator Frank Blas. Tony Ada and Frank Blas.
On the motion to add co-sponsors to Bill number 346-36, are there any objections? The amendment is to add co-sponsors to the bill. On the amendment, hearing no objections, motion passes. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment that's proffered by Senator Chalai and co-sponsored by myself and Senator Rangel, the amendment is on line 13, page 8. My colleagues, this amendment will include the provisions in law that identify who serve as public safety and law enforcement officers from Section 51101 on post and from Section 55102 that identifies other law enforcement not in post. This is to ensure that all public safety and law enforcement officers from all sectors, GPD, GFD, Customs, Revenue and Tax, Airport, Port, DOC, DYA, AG, courts, and agriculture are given the same opportunities with this new option for early retirement. We ask for your support of this amendment to ensure balance in addressing this concern. Citizen Masi.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. On the amendment, Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the amendment. I just want to know, the Director of the Retirement Fund said she was going to suggest to us to use language that matched her research. Like, I think she said she used peace officer instead of public safety or law enforcement officer. And I just want to know if this language originated from her or another source, because I thought that was our point of recessing, was to wait for language from her to make them match. There were options. The Attorney General suggested we use the term peace officer. Director Burns said they use law enforcement officers in giving out the raises. And then, of course, there's uniformed personnel, which I think we've all decided we don't want to use, and we want to use the more inclusive. So now between law enforcement officer, as defined in this section, versus peace officer that the retirement fund used, are we aware of any distinction? If I could ask the author of the amendment or any of the authors of the amendment.
The sponsor to the question.
Madam Chair, as we were discussing it with the retirement folks, one of the main things was not to attempt to change the code, which was, if I'm correct, was 8104, but to add the other folks that were not included. Because when you look at the code that they were required when they did the study, it didn't identify such as the Attorney General's office and Revenue and Tax folks. And this was to make sure that they're inclusive, because what we're referencing when we were speaking with that and the DOA was that several years back they passed for law enforcement folks to get the 40% pay increase. And that's where the additional folks were identified. So that as the intent of the author of the amendment to add the Attorney General's office, it would have been missing Revenue and Tax to be inclusive of that. That was the whole intent. But I understand where our colleagues are asking about the law enforcement versus the post. If you notice that the other two sections were not identified in the post.
Madam Chair, point of information.
Please state your point of information.
I offer this point of information because I was speaking to Paula about the amendment during the recess. So I think we have two different things here. I think there was a discussion on the definition or the title on the law enforcement, but for the purposes of this amendment that's being proffered right now, maybe we can further amend the amendment if we want to change the designation. But it was to ensure that we weren't operating within the definition that retirement uses for the inclusivity and what Senator Pito and others are trying to do with regard to including the courts and also rev and tax officers that fall under the 40%. So I think that we're on the track on both tracks, if we want to uniform the title of the positions. But this amendment in particular is to include, and so that retirement is not confused as to their reading of the definition that they use. This is to clean it up and add a new section to be able to cover those. And if we want to maybe we can amend the amendment to change the description of the officer. I just offer that as part of the discussion that I had with Paula. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Dueñas. There's been a request for a moment's recess to fix the amendment. We are in recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. After discussion with our council and the sponsor, it's clear to me that this amendment includes everyone who we were trying to include. It's more inclusive than the original definition of uniformed personnel, and it's equally inclusive to the terms used in other parts of the code, peace officer. So I support this amendment and the use of these terms throughout the bill so that we reach our intent of including those who are already covered as law enforcement officers, who were covered in the pay raises given to law enforcement officers, that they will also be qualified for this type of retirement. This includes investigators at the Attorney General's office who, I understand, I think were all police officers when they started, and different positions. I think they also now include some investigative positions at the Department of Revenue and Taxation and others. So I support the amendment and the bill. Situs Masi to the sponsor of the bill for putting this bill on. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Terlahi. On the amendment, Senator San Augustine, you may close.
Madam Chair, I think one simple amendment to the amendment, and that is just to allow legal to make the technical corrections that's needed, such as wherever there's listed as a uniformed personnel, be striked, and we've already communicated this with legal and the clerks.
Thank you. On the motion to allow for technical amendments to the amendment, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Senator San Augustine. On the amendment, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Are there any other amendments? No. Senator Terlahi, if I can ask for an amendment to reconsider your last amendment for co-sponsors. Before we broke into the Committee of the Whole, we already added Senator Dueñas, and so your amendment, and also Senator Ada and Senator Blas are already included, so if you can please amend your amendment to add co-sponsors Shelton and Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I add the Speaker, Senator Teresa Terlahi, Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Chris Dueñas, Senator Tony Ada, and Senator Frank Blas.
Thank you very much, Senator. Yes, thank you very much. So a motion to add Senator Torres, Speaker Terlahi, Senator Shelton, and Senator Blas and Senator Ada and Senator Dueñas have already been added to the bill. So on the motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much, Senator Terlahi. We have one more amendment in the drive. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this amendment would add a new section to the bill for reporting requirements. So it states the Governor of Guam Retirement Fund shall submit to Y Legislature in Guam an annual report of the following: total number of new employees who participated in the defined benefit 1.75 plan. B, total number of employees who are members of the defined contribution system who elected on a voluntary basis to become members of the defined benefit plan. C, a total number of public safety, so in this case it was law enforcement officers per agency who are members in the defined benefit plan that are eligible to retire. D, total number of law enforcement officers per agency who are members in the defined benefit plan that have elected to retire, and total number of vacancies per agency. And finally, E, fiscal analysis by Bureau of Budget and Management Research and the Office of Finance and Budget, and allow legal to renumber and make technical corrections. So this amendment basically is just to keep us apprised if there are any impacts that we have to address during budget cycle. And also, I think, what are the impacts to the agencies in regards to successional planning? And so, yeah, this is just basically keeps us informed if any changes need to be adjusted or made by the legislature. Yeah, there are some spelling corrections that are needed, so hence the need for legal to make those corrections.
Thank you, Senator Perez. On the amendment, are there any objections to the amendment?
Sorry. If I could just amend the amendment to include the discussion that was made prior to this. So it's not just law enforcement officers, but to include the language that was in the previous amendment. It stated public safety and law enforcement officers as defined in section 5.1.101B of chapter 51, title 17 GCA, and identified in sections 5.5.102G 1 through 7 of chapter 55, title 10 Guam Code annotated. So those basically, I just want to make sure it's consistent with the amendment that was previously made and accepted. So allow legal to make that correction.
Sure. On the amendment to the amendment, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Senator Perez, would you like to close on your amendment?
No, I just asked for my colleagues' support.
Okay. Hearing no objections, are there any objections to the amendment as amended? Hearing none, motion carries. That completes the amendments for Bill number 346-36. Senator Terlahi, you are recognized. We'll take a moment's recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Senator Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I move to rise from the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation that Bill number 346-36LS be placed on the third reading file.
Thank you, Senator. On that motion to rise from the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation that Bill number 346-36LS as amended on the floor and further amended in the Committee of the Whole be placed in the third reading file. Are there any objections? Hearing and seeing none, motion carries. We stand in recess.
We're back from the Committee of the Whole. I'm back on second reading. Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Assiduous Masi, Madam Speaker, I wish to report back to the body after deliberation of Bill 346-36 as amended on the floor and further amended in the Committee of the Whole, with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to place on the third reading file.
On that recommendation from the Committee of the Whole, there's a motion to accept that recommendation. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Assiduous Masi. Continuing with the second reading file, we have Bill number 351-36 COR. Senator Rigel, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place number 351-36 COR as amended by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Power, and Energy Utilities and the Arts into the third reading file and to discuss first.
Please proceed.
Bill 351-36 COR is an act to add a new Article 6 to Chapter 8 of Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to creating a virtual power plant program. This virtual power plant program would enable homeowners, business owners, government agencies, and nonprofit organizations to host solar photovoltaic systems on the rooftops of their properties in exchange for credits to their electricity bills at no cost to the host. The goal is to provide clean, renewable, distributed generation of energy for the energy grid, build our island's resilience, and most importantly, reduce power rates by reducing fuel consumption. The single largest cost that makes up your power bill is the cost of fuel. It makes up roughly 70% of the power bill. Renewable energy uses no fuel, and by eliminating fuel costs, it reduces power bills. So what is a virtual power plant? A virtual power plant is a system where a network of rooftop solar systems and battery storage systems work together like a single power plant. The virtual power plant is managed by computers and special software that controls the output of solar energy and the storage of solar energy to match the power system's needs. Virtual power plant systems have been employed in other jurisdictions. They've been employed all across Australia. It's a system that's been promoted by Tesla owner Elon Musk, and similar systems known as solar host programs have been employed in places in the states such as the state of Texas. As it stands, Guam is reliant on fossil fuels, which makes the island vulnerable to the volatility of oil prices. Nearly 70% of an average ratepayer's bill is attributed to the cost of fuel that's driven by the global oil market. This has placed Guam residents in a vulnerable position that has negatively affected ratepayers, increased the cost of goods and services, reduced the purchasing power of Guam's families, increased the cost of living, and overall been a detriment to the island's economy. You see, on Guam, we have no oil, no natural gas, no natural fuel resources except for renewable energy. This means that we import all of our fuel, which means we then send our money off island into oil-rich economies and into the pockets of big oil. Instead, we should look towards producing our own energy through the only energy source we currently have available and that is feasible on Guam, which is renewable energy. This will keep more money on island circulating in our economy and in our pockets. Over the past decade, renewable energy alternatives such as solar photovoltaic systems have become more affordable and accessible. Such systems have already begun to lower the energy costs for residents and businesses who've been fortunate enough to afford making such an investment out of pocket. Furthermore, GPA has added over 125 megawatts of utility-scale renewable energy and energy storage from solar farms in Alahan and Manilao, and strategically placed battery energy storage systems. GPA's 2022 Integrated Resource Plan anticipates over 180 megawatts in additional renewable energy projects. I thank the Guam Power Authority for working with me on this legislation by providing feedback and revisions to the initial language. GPA General Manager John Beneventi was very open to this idea. He and his team provided very valuable input, and I look forward to continue to working with them on attaining the ultimate goal of 100% renewable energy by 2045. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory and the Guam Power Authority have asserted that solar energy is currently the most viable form of renewable energy for Guam. Rooftop solar presents solutions to Guam's limited land inventory and the vulnerability of solar farms to typhoons. Rooftop solar systems reduce the need for land while utilizing spaces that are currently not being utilized. Rooftop solar has been proven to be more resilient to typhoons based on data from rooftop solar projects both in Puerto Rico and in the Northern Mariana Islands. However, currently the only rooftop solar program that's available through GPA is the Net Energy Metering Program, or NEM program. GPA and the CCU have asserted that this NEM program is too cost prohibitive for the Power Authority, and thus they assert that it becomes less sustainable with the more customers that are added to the NEM program. The NEM program allows homeowners to produce energy via rooftop solar systems. Excess energy produced by NEM customers is then fed back into the energy grid. The homeowner is then credited on a 1-to-1 ratio based on the net energy they produce, resulting in a reduction in their power bill. GPA and the CCU have asserted that this amounts to the Power Authority purchasing solar power from homeowners at the same rate at which they sell power to other customers. Thus, the Virtual Power Plant program provides an alternative rooftop solar program that addresses the challenges of the NEM program while promoting more accessible, affordable, clean, renewable energy. In this way, GPA is able to structure the Virtual Power Plant rooftop solar program in a manner that generates cheaper and cleaner power for the grid, maintains the stream of revenues necessary for the operations of the overall energy grid, broadens the access of renewable energy to ratepayers, lessens its reliance on imported fossil fuels, lessens the need for land, lowers utility bills, and works towards Guam's overall renewable energy goal. This program adds renewable energy to the grid through a distributed generation model with no cost to homeowners and zero upfront cost to the utility, while decreasing the overall cost of fuel, thus decreasing rates for all customers. A virtual power plant program enables GPA to manage the energy produced through a network of solar hosts with rooftop solar photovoltaic systems and battery energy storage systems, as if this network itself was a power plant. I believe the virtual power plant program is a tailored solution to Guam's energy needs that will reduce power rates, build our resiliency, and take us one step closer towards reaching our goal, well, at least it's my goal, of making Guam green again, green with renewable energy. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask my colleagues for their support on the measure.
Cesar Masi. On the bill, is there anyone who would like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a point of inquiry. I understand that PUC and GPA both supported the bill. That's really great. But I just wanted to see if they had any input as far as what were the parameters upon which they would accept any kind of contracts with the virtual power plant producer. For instance, will there be a cap on the cost? Was there any mention of capping of cost? And in regards to what ratepayers normally pay for traditional power production.
Would the sponsor yield to the question?
Sure. Could you explain the question a little further? I'm not sure if I understood the question.
Yeah, so one of the concerns is that, if we are going to purchase power from a virtual power producer, is there any guarantees that the rate is not going to exceed what we normally pay currently?
Senator
So
Reject.
I can answer. To answer the question, the bill itself doesn't touch anything to do with rates, and that's because I've been told repeatedly by the Public Utilities Commission, I'm sure you've heard, and multiple testimony provided that the legislature cannot do anything that affects rates, caps rates, or does anything with reference to rates. Rate setting authorities, the rate setting powers are the sole authority of the Public Utilities Commission. So the bill itself does not cap any rates. However, what it does is it sets it up so that the Guam Power Authority puts this thing out to bid. And typically what they do, like with any other power purchase agreement, including the Ukudu power plant that's going to be constructed, what they do is they put it out to bid, they take a look at the bid specs, and then they pick whichever bidder they think is providing the best possible bid at rates that they feel are fair and that the Public Utilities Commission, the PUC, approves as well. In addition to that, I will say that solar has already been proven to be cheaper than current conventional power production, which is, for example, power production that relies on oil. And again, the reasoning for that is because fuel is so much more expensive, and the cost of producing solar panels and the other equipment necessary has come down dramatically to the point now where even similar programs that have utilized rooftop solar in this virtual power plant type model across the globe have come in at much lower rates than traditional power production.
Senator Perez, you have the floor.
Okay, so then I guess then we're leaving it up to of course, the system, the PUC and GPA to determine. At this point, it is open-ended. The bill is open-ended enough for GPA, PUC to make those decisions. But I guess just to put on the record, it's just my concern. I know solar power definitely is, we're not paying for importation of oil, so that really cuts the cost. But just, we don't want to make these assumptions necessarily when we're passing laws. And just to, put on the record that, to ensure, we want to make sure that GPA, that they're not selling the power to customers at a higher rates, as well as to make sure that they're recuperating cost in regards to maintaining lines. And I guess the fact that General Manager Beneventi supports the bill, I think that seems to endorse that they are going to implement this program with those considerations in mind. So just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Citizen Masi. On the bill, Senator Torres, you are recognized.
If the mover will so yield, I have a question. My question is on page 5, under the definitions, under D, line 6, developer is defined as a licensed solar development business owned and operated by a legal resident of Guam who's maintained a continuous legal residential address for a period of no fewer than 5 years prior to application with the utility as a developer. I was just wondering, in defining a developer as somebody who has had a business of no fewer than 5 years, has the sponsor contemplated how many then would be eligible under this, and does that create a special advantage to one person or a couple people over the landscape of potential developers? I was just wondering how he factored in that 5 years, given Guam's small profile of businesses.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't believe it gives any specific. There's numerous solar providers that have been in business more than 5 years. So the real intent of that is to keep some big corporation from coming in from off island and then just sort of scooping up this project as they've done in the past with other power projects.
Thank you. That actually satisfies then my concern, because I remember at one point, not too many years ago, when we were thinking about this type of program, that was one of the concerns, that there were very few in the market that met that criteria. And in fact, it appeared that such definition would make it almost a sole source type of scenario, special legislation scenario. But I think if that is true, that it has been surveyed and there are multiple companies on Guam, then that concern that I had would no longer be an issue for me. So I thank him for the response.
Mrs. Usmasi, Senator, on the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Actually, Madam Speaker, my concern too was in this section of the legislation. As we know, quite a bit of individuals have left the island of Guam because the high cost of living, or even people who had businesses here have shut down. But what's hopeful is that we have a group of new entrepreneurs, coming in and deciding to open up companies. And many of them have the resources with regards to knowledge on solar energy, and they're local. They're from Guam. They're here. But they've only been in business for about maybe 6-7 months, maybe even a year. But they are local. The comment made that this is to stop the big companies from coming in and taking over. Well, that means those individuals, these entrepreneurs that we're encouraging to start businesses on Guam and keep them home on Guam, won't stand a chance. I don't know how many companies on Guam who have that criteria of 5 years. So I asked the author if he knows how many companies on this island that are locally owned, been on Guam, that have that 5-year criteria in this legislation.
Would the author yield?
Sure. I don't know the exact number. I know of at least 2 for sure, possibly 3 to 4. I don't know the exact number, but I know for sure 2.
Senator Taitigui, you're right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then again, we're looking at the ability for our own people to open their businesses and provide that kind of service to our own people, and it kind of hinders it now. I'm pretty sure that when GPA goes into any kind of contract, they'll look at their background and make a choice that's for the best. But right now, Madam Chair, I don't have amendment, but I'd like to make an amendment to this section to allow that next generation on Guam who wants to open up businesses, who's only been in business for a year, and considering that we've been in COVID for about 3 years, this makes it very difficult for anybody now that's local, especially if they're trying to open up their business. So if I can take 1 minute to work on an amendment, or if you want to continue on, Madam Chair,
Yes,
then what I'll do is I'll just come back and reserve to come back with my amendment, if that's okay, so we can keep moving.
I'd like to keep moving. Is there any objection to having the senator come back with her amendment? If not, motion carries. So is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? On the bill, Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And actually, it's a question to the author of the bill, if you can yield to the question. And this is relative to page 5, starting at line 12. And it reads, the Guam Power Authority shall establish a virtual power plant program within 9 months of enactment of this article and approval by the Guam Public Utilities Commission. The question that I have here is the 9 months,
I'm sorry, with the author,
yeah, so the question, I'm going to pose the question. Is the 9 months here inclusive of the approval needed by the PUC, or is it just the 9 months to be able to create the article? This is in relative to page 5, line 12. So is the 9 months also inclusive of the preparing the article plus the PUC?
I can yield to that question. Yes, it's 9 months, but it's after the PUC has to approve it first. The language here, specifically the language we adopted, is recommended by the PUC and GPA in their public testimony during the public hearing. That's actually the only amendment of substance we made to the bill. If you look, the bill is as amended by the committee. We amended it in committee after recommendations by the PUC and GPA to change the language with regards to the question you're asking about the 9 months approval, right?
Yeah.
So this is specifically the language the PUC asked for.
Okay, okay. With that, I mean, you know, Madam Speaker, I mean, with regard to the concept and the idea, I applaud the author for being innovative in being able to find, first off, you know, a new way to be able to capture, you know, energy that can be sourced out to other places, but then also a new venture in entrepreneurship and business. You know, this is not something that obviously, because of renewable energy and solar, you know, there's really no tried and true proven method. It's got to be tried. We got to see if it works. I'm willing to take that risk. I'm willing to take that opportunity to see if we can do this. So, you know, barring any other language, you know, that it, you know, be specific towards, you know, certain individuals, I stand in support of this legislation. Thank you very much.
thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there any other senator who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Is there any other senator who'd like to be recognized on the bill? If not, then Senator Taitigui, are you ready with your amendment? You are recognized.
Madam Speaker, just for the sake of time, I'd like to just ask if the body, it's okay to just strike out the amount of years, period. I talked with the author of the legislation, and he agrees that we can just take out the requirement of amount of years.
Please cite the page and line
Okay.
number. Page 5, line 8.
Madam Chair, if I may, Madam Speaker, it's on page 5, and the area to strike it out would be on lines, well, we'll start with line 6, letter D. Developer means a licensed solar development business that is owned and operated by a legal resident of Guam. And then from there, Madam Speaker, we would strike out who has maintained and continuous legal resident address and address on Guam for a period of no fewer than 5 years prior to the applications until the utility as a developer. So we're just striking out that. Beginning on line 7, striking out who, all the way to line 9 at the end of developer. We're just striking that out.
Is there any objection to allowing this amendment to not be in writing? Is there any objection to that? Hearing no objection, that motion carries. On the amendment, which is to delete on page 5, on line 7 through 9, the phrase beginning with who and ending with developer. Is there any objection, or would anyone like to speak on that amendment? Would anyone like to speak on the amendment? If not, is there any objection to the amendment? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Taitagui, you still have the floor. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Perez, I believe you were recognized.
Yeah, just a point of inquiry. So in the definition of developer, can it also include cooperatives? So let's say it's a group of individuals, cooperative, so it's owned by the homeowners. Is this a possible inclusion, or is that definition include that? If they have the means to put in solar panels as well as batteries?
Would the sponsor yield to this question? That's a point of inquiry. Would the sponsor yield?
Yeah, I don't know. That's not how it's defined.
All right, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? If not, then the sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleagues for the opportunity today to discuss this bill. Let me explain the genesis of this bill. So, currently we have only one way of getting rooftop solar. Well, technically 2 ways, okay? The first way and the most common way is through this NEM program, Net Energy Metering Program. It's a program where GPA allows a homeowner to put solar panels on their rooftop, and then the excess energy that those solar panels produce gets essentially sold back to GPA at the same rate that the customers are currently paying for their power. So what GPA has said is that means they can't make any money off of that power because they're actually buying NEM program power at a higher rate than any other power plant or means of power production. So usually what will happen is, let's say I believe here's an example, the solar farm in Manila is producing power at a rate of 8 cents per kilowatt hour. What that means is they're selling that power to GPA at 8 cents per kilowatt hour. Then GPA turns around and sells it to us now at wherever the LEAC is at now, which I can't remember because it's pretty high. It's more than 2 or 3 times what the solar farm in Manila is charging. So the current way we have of doing rooftop solar is through this NEM program. And again, the NEM program, the customer sells the excess solar power to GPA at the same rate that GPA is going to turn around and sell it to other customers. So GPA says they don't get to make any profit on it and they can't pay for all their other expenses. That brought up a whole nother argument about the value of solar and other issues that gets really complicated. I could spend all day discussing, but we're limited on time here. The bottom line is it's something that GPA has said is unsustainable. That's why they've actually worked several methods of trying to make it more sustainable by requiring more investments into the NEM side, requiring storage. They wanted to increase some other charges. So it's looking like this NEM rooftop solar program is no longer viable. It's kind of reached its maximum point. You could argue you could do a few more like that, but we're pretty much reaching the point now where GPA and the PUC and the CC are all pushing back, saying this is costing too much on our end, it's not feasible. So I started looking around for what's an alternative to do rooftop solar, and this is one of the alternatives I came up with. The only other option, of course, is for someone to go completely off-grid. Now, you can go off-grid, pay for the solar panels yourself, pay for everything, and then GPA has nothing to do with you, but that means you're off-grid. That means you produce your own power completely. You're not connected to any power grid. You're not connected to the power lines, period. You just produce your own power. You have to buy your own storage system, pay for it, and maintain that all yourself. So those are really the only two options for rooftop solar right now. And it's really expensive to go completely off-grid, and most people don't want to go off-grid. And to be honest, I don't think we want people to begin going off-grid, because there's resiliency in a grid. And what I mean by that is when one person's power isn't producing, another person's power helps fill in those blanks. There's resiliency in a network. That's why the internet was created this way. It's literally a network where if one side goes down, the other side kind of keeps it up. If certain things go down, other servers keep it up, right? So there's resiliency in a network, and there's resiliency in a grid from a structural perspective. So I think to create more resiliency in this grid, it's a good idea to do rooftop solar and distributed generation through this sort of network idea. And I believe this is the way to do it, because it's a way that allows GPA to also be able to put out an RFP so that they are purchasing power from the power producers at a rate that they're able to now turn around and sell back to the people of Guam, so they can pay for their expenses in maintaining the overall grid and the overall power system. At the same time, they should be able to structure it in a way that it is actually cheaper than current power production methods, simply by virtue of the fact that solar production is so far cheaper than producing power through oil at this time. So this was the idea that we came up with, my office and I, by doing research and looking around and seeing what other jurisdictions are doing. We saw that this was being employed in Australia, both in Southern Australia and Western Australia. There's a huge program where they're doing this same type of thing. It's also being done in Texas, and they're looking at doing it in other states as well. And it's something that's it's a new concept that's really being promoted and pushed now, this idea of a virtual power plant. And I think this bill is structured in a way that gives GPA, the CCU, and the PUC the flexibility to develop a program that truly creates a win-win situation for all. A big reason I'm a proponent of rooftop solar in particular is because we have limited land space on Guam. We don't want to cover the island with solar panels and places and properties that could be farmlands. And as everyone knows, I'm a big proponent of developing agriculture on Guam. We're not going to be able to develop agriculture and grow things on Guam if we took up all our land for solar farms. We already have some utility-scale solar farms. In fact, the biggest one is the one built in Manilao, and that did create some other environmental problems as well, because unfortunately, the contractor did not do a good job. That's just the truth. They didn't do a good job, and it resulted in a lot of erosion in that Manilao property along Back Road near the Marble Caves, the infamous now Marble Cave project that flooded the Marble Caves with mud. That can all be avoided if it's put on rooftops. Rooftops solve the issue of land space. For me, rooftops also are wasted space. I mean, very few people do anything with their rooftops. Of course, there's a few people who do want to do something with their rooftop. Most people don't. The roof is just a place you go up to once a year, if you're lucky, just to water blast and paint, right? So let's put solar panels on these rooftops and put them to work. Use this wasted space and put it to work towards producing power. In addition to that, in the research I was doing, solar farms that are on land are a lot more susceptible to typhoons. And based on the research I was doing and asking around, and even speaking with the solar companies that are in Guam, I asked what's the reason for this. The reason is because these solar panels on the farms that are on land, they have to be raised off the ground by, say, 3 to 4 feet, depending on how they design it, right? So just a few feet off the ground is enough room for the wind to kind of get underneath the panels, create lift, and rip those panels out of the ground. Solar panels that are placed on rooftops are almost flush to the rooftop. They don't allow much space for the wind to get underneath the panels and create that lift that rips the panels off of the rooftops. In addition, there's actual data that supports this. The solar panels, particularly in the rooftops in Saipan, withstood the super typhoon strength winds of U2. That's the most recent super typhoon. Withstood those winds. In fact, I believe the solar developer said they only lost one rooftop solar system in Saipan, and it was not because of the wind itself ripping the solar panels off. It's because the neighbor's twin roof landed on the other neighbor's roof and crushed the solar panels. It's because of debris. So that same risk of debris is there, of course, for solar farms. However, the bigger risk with solar farms that are on land, again, is that they are so far off the ground, they allow for the wind to come underneath the panels and lift the panels up and rip them out of the ground. That's not the case with rooftops. So I think rooftops not only reduce the need for land, they're more resilient to typhoons, and they also spread the generation of energy across the grid, which reduces transmission costs, distribution costs, and just creates overall more grid resiliency. So when we looked at all these things, we believe that my staff and I and all those who worked with me on the bill believe that this, including the Guam Power Authority, who had a lot of input on the bill, and the PUC, and I appreciate their input and their help with the bill. I think this is a viable alternative to the NEM program, and I think this is going to be a great program that we start out small with. I envision it's going to expand big, and we're going to see most of our rooftops covered with solar, and one day we will make Guam green again, green with renewable energy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Ridgell. On the motion to place Bill number 351-36 COR in the third reading file, on the bill as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor. On that motion to place it in the third reading file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on Bill number 358-36 COR. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we move 358 to after 355, and that we'll be able to go to the committee of the whole at that time.
On that motion to set aside Bill number 358-36 COR until after Bill number 355 on the agenda, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Legislature is back from recess. So we're now on Bill number 356-36 COR. I'd like to invite the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move to place Bill number 356-36 COR as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture to the third reading file, and I would like to discuss it.
On the motion to place Bill 356-36 COR on the third reading file, are there any objections?
No, I'd like to discuss it, Madam
Okay,
Speaker.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So Bill number 356-36 COR amends Title 10 of the Guam Code annotated and repeals some of the existing Guam Allied Health Examiners rules and regulations pertaining to the practice of acupuncture, and supersedes it by new rules relative to approving the adoption of comprehensive new rules and regulations for the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners. So in the bill, there are changes to the code, and also, it also says it will approve the attached exhibit, which are the changes to the rules and regulations as well. So Bill number 356 was introduced at the request of the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners and seeks to amend the current rules and regulations and statutes that govern the board and all of the allied health practices on Guam. The draft of the bill was unanimously approved. My apologies. The draft of the bill was unanimously approved and passed on November 4 by the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners in their meeting and submitted to the Committee on Health on November 7th, 2022. Before the transmittal to the Guam Legislature, the draft rules and regulations under the board had multiple public hearings on the proposed updated rules and regulations, and those public hearings took place on October 7 and October 11 and October 13th. And they told us at the public hearing that every member or every licensed allied health person was given notice of those hearings. The Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners statutes and rules were created in 1998 through Public Law 24-329. There were a few changes since then, but a comprehensive update in the last 2 decades has not happened until now. These proposed changes include the composition of the Board of Allied Health Examiners to include 2 public members, an amendment to the definition and scope of practice of acupuncture and oriental medicine to include various practices such as the application of acupuncture needles and electrodynamic stimulation, as well as ordering blood and laboratory tests, x-rays, or image tests to assist in making diagnosis and monitoring of a treatment plan. And to the amendments to the definition and scope of practice of dietetics and nutritionists that will give authority to ordering nutrition-related laboratory tests to check and track nutrition status. Amendments were also made to the prescriptive authority for clinical psychologists, which will allow clinical psychologists to prescribe medicine without the need to consult a physician, but also add stipulations in ensuring that those clinical psychologists have the training, education requirements, they pass an examination to be able to prescribe medicine to patients. There are also amendments to the Allied Health Board's fee schedule, their budget and revolving fund. There are amendments to the continuing education requirements that will include 6 hours of ethics training for clinical psychologists, licensed professional counselors, licensed mental health counselors, and marriage and family therapists, and 2 hours of ethics education for other professions. There are amendments to specific rules governing the practice of veterinary medicine that give trained persons performing animal euthanasia, regarding that practice. There's also a repeal of, well, all the prior administrative rules and regs and replaced with these comprehensive new administrative rules and regulations. This is a product of several years of work by the Board of Allied Health. And it's really a landmark movement on their part. They are one of the first boards after an oversight hearing that we held where the boards pretty much reported on the status of their rules and the updates to their rules, which almost every one of the health boards is working on updated rules and regulations. Some of them have none in place at all. So, but this is the first to come in, completed and adopted by their boards, their respective boards. So when we held the public hearing on this, we received supportive testimony from, of course, the Board of Allied Health Examiners, Dr. Velma Harper of Harper Valley Boarding and Quarantine Kennels, Dr. Keith Horinucci of Dr. Horinucci Wellness Clinic, Dr. Ian Twaddle of the University of Guam, and Dr. Cameron G. Meno of the University of Guam, Dr. Mary Cruz, Associate Interim Dean at the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Guam, Dean James Selman of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Guam, Dr. Ron Rapadas of Rapadas Psychological Services, PLCC, and also practicing at the Judiciary. The committee also received additional testimonies from Dr. Robert Kinscherf, Executive Director of the Center for Law, Brain, and Behavior, Massachusetts General Hospital, and Dr. Stephen Benke of the Department of Psychiatry, Harvard Medical School, Dr. Thomas Shea, Dr. Gary Larkin, and Dr. Zhang Si Yu. The committee amended the bill to show the original language of the statutes that was repealed and reenacted, as well as incorporated the recommendation of UOG regarding clinical psychology associates. I would also like to make a couple amendments to the bill here on the floor, Madam Chair, and these are to clarify, make more precise some of the language that is in this comprehensive legislation. I believe, have the floor amendments been
We
passed
need a
out?
moment's recess for the amendments to be uploaded.
No, they're uploaded, Madam Chair. They've been sent in for quite a while now. I think we just need copies.
Okay, then, a moment's recess for everyone to get copies. Just a 1-minute recess. Iles Laturin is back from recess. I recognize Speaker Chalahi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We did send these floor amendments in. They've been uploaded since in 3:20. So the first amendment is on page 23. We'll begin with the page 23 amendment, line 26. And this is the, to qualify for prescriptive authority, a clinical psychologist must have the following. So there's already a list in the bill, and this is going to amend that list of what a clinical psychologist must have in order to have prescriptive authority. Not all clinical psychologists are going to have this. This is a very limited number of them with these very special qualifications who are going to be eligible for this authority. It adds stipulations for the education and examination. This is at the request of the chairperson of the Guam Board of Allied Health, who said that it is to provide better clarity and the requirements on the education and training necessary to attain competency for a licensed clinical psychologist who wants to pursue this authority. Of course, the rationale behind allowing this prescriptive authority is that clinical psychologists see patients 55 minutes or more for assessment and 55 minutes for psychotherapy and follow-up. There are more clinical psychologists available to provide mental health care as well as substance-related problems. Denying a well-trained and qualified clinical psychologist to have independent prescriptive authority is to deny access care for patients needing psychological, mental health, and substance-related illness treatment. That's a quote from the Allied Health Board chairperson. We acknowledge at the hearing that there is a shortage of these personnel, and so this is a very limited authority being granted for those who will have completed a program of education in an organized program of intensive didactic instruction consisted of minimum of 300 contact hours defined by the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, consisting of the following core areas of instruction: neuroscience, pharmacology, psychopharmacology, physiology, pathophysiology, appropriate and relevant physical and laboratory assessment, and clinical pharmacotherapeutics. Number 2, having obtained supervised and relevant clinical experience, consistent treatment of a minimum of 100 patients, sufficient to attain competency in the treatment of a diverse population. Number 3, proof of successfully passing the psychopharmacology examination for psychologists, the PEP, administered by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, ASPPB. A current Federal Drug Enforcement Administration certification, a current Guam Controlled Substance registration from DPHSS. A licensed clinical psychologist shall not prescribe any drug or class of drugs that the clinical psychologist is not competent to prescribe as determined by the board, and may not prescribe any drugs that are not routinely administered within the clinical psychologist's scope of practice. Authority shall be automatically revoked for an invalid or revoked Guam or federal DEA registration, may be revoked for any violation of this act or applicable rules and regs as determined by the board. Authority shall be renewed at the time of licensure renewal. That means every year. The board shall determine minimum continuing education requirements for the renewal. So again, my amendment is just to add these subsections 1 and 2 and amend number 3 as stated above, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment to Bill number 356-COR, are there any members wishing to speak? Are there any objections to the amendment? Seeing and hearing no objections, motion carries. Madam Speaker, you still have the floor.
Sijus Masi colleagues, the second amendment is on page 34. So on line 6, page 34, it already describes the training that is required to, means a doctoral level training in clinical psychology at, and it currently says at an accredited institution of higher learning in the U.S., accredited by APA or ASPPB. We are amending that to instead say accredited institution of higher learning in the U.S. and requiring, and to remove those specific accreditations. And the rationale behind that, Madam Chair, is to delete APA and ASPPB. According to Dr. Balaja, the chairperson of the Allied Health Board, not all doctoral candidates who left Guam to attain higher education in psychology are enrolled in APA-accredited programs or designated by the ASPPB. If future clinical psychologists with the proper education and training returning to Guam to practice with the clause of APA or ASPPB designated schools, we will be depriving our younger generations to obtain a clinical psychologist license to practice accordingly. There are many well-known colleges and universities in the U.S. that are not accredited by APA, but are accredited by the Middle States Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools, the New England Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools, the North Central Association of Schools and Colleges, and the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. That's the rationale, is just to widen the scope of who the board can license based on accreditation.
All right, are there any members wishing to speak on the amendment? Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just a question that I'd like to know the author of the bill would yield to with regards to this amendment. This amendment that is being proffered basically would strike out the areas that were placed. It's going to basically take the old section and just revert it back to the old section. And it was my understanding that this section was basically vetted and approved, or vetted in some fashion with the board who has submitted this request for this legislation. And I'm just wondering, was this language, or was this something that the board in itself approved, that to revert back to the original language?
Would the sponsor like to yield to the question?
Take a moment's recess.
Yes, thank you. A moment's recess. We are now in recess. E. Legislature is back from recess. Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will yield to that question. It's actually a very good question. So as the proffer of the question suggested, this amendment of mine will revert this statute back to its original form. In other words, it does not accept what the board had asked us to promulgate at first. And this is at the request of the chairperson of the board. And so I am willing to go along with that and allow them to make further changes to this if necessary going forward. But the reason for that is so that we do not preclude anyone who is lined up right now to graduate and become licensed from being licensed on Guam. Because of our dire need, I think we should continue to accept them until there is, again, a specific request to have these types of accreditation changed. And as she pointed out in her rationale, to go back to status quo on this one provision, there are other accreditations in place besides the two that were in the original bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
All right. Thank you. Senator Blas?
I'm satisfied with that. Thank you.
All right.
Chair.
Mrs. Masi. Are there any other members wishing to speak on the amendment? Speaker Terlahi, if you'd like to close on the amendment. All right. Are there any objections to the amendment? Seeing and hearing no objections, motion carries. Speaker, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, colleagues. And Madam Speaker, one more amendment. That's to page 35. Oh, sorry. Yes, page 35, line 4. Okay, this is still talking about clinical psychologists and qualifications for licensure in particular. So right now, again, the bill says that the qualifications for licensure, the bill is providing that they should be accredited by the APA or the ASPPB, and I am again asking to delete that and just say they shall be from an accredited college or university in the U.S., period. Again, this is at the request of the Allied Health Board Director. So it would pretty much, again, revert this to status quo. And then on Part C, this is talking about the tests. So the examination, they have to complete an examination for professional practice in psychology, an EPP. And it divides into parts 1 and part 2, and my amendment would say both parts need to be passed in order to be licensed. And this is because it's really a timing issue. The original bill said this will not be effective until July 2023. However, according to Dr. Bala Hajia, we should not provide exceptions to this examination requirement. The board had voted to adopt part 2 of the exam as early as January 2020. In other words, everyone was on notice already since January 2020 that part 2 of the exam would be required for licensure. And so they were requiring this as of November 1, 2021. And so this issue was brought up in the meeting on December 2nd and pointed out that we should make this amendment, Madam Chair.
Are there any members wishing to speak on the amendment? Okay. I see no one, no members. So, Speaker, if you'd like to close on your amendment.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
All right. Are there any objections to the amendment? Seeing or hearing no objections, motion carries. Okay. Are there any members wishing to speak on the main motion? Okay, seeing no members wishing to speak. Oh, sorry, Senator
amendment?
Blas, you're recognized.
Are we still on the amendment, Madam Chair?
It,
Oh.
objection, so it passed.
Okay, so still on the
Yeah.
right? Right, but on the bill. I'm still speaking on the
Oh.
bill?
My apologies, Speaker. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, I'd like to also add co-sponsors, or make a motion to add co-sponsors to the bill, Senators Tello Taitukwi, Joanne Brown, and Frank Blas Jr., who were present during the hearing. This was held in the evening, and there were quite a few people who came and testified.
Okay. Are there any members wishing to speak on the amendment? Are there any objections to the amendment? Seeing and hearing no objections, motion carries. Speaker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, so the bill overall is to, improve the standards of practice, to make them more specific what the board can or cannot do in regards to enforcing those standards, and to hopefully expand our ability to meet the needs on Guam for some of these allied health practitioners, including especially the clinical psychologists, Madam Speaker. So I ask my colleagues for their support.
All right, thank you, Speaker. Are there any members wishing to speak on the motion or the bill? Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I stand in support of this bill, 356-36 COR. When I stood as the chairman of Health back in the 29th Guam Legislature, I remember already having discussions with, at that time, the expanded, which was an allied health board that had basically cosmetologists or veterinarians selling cosmetologists on how they can do their practices. And I'm glad that after a couple decades that they've been able to, for lack of a better term, whittle down the number of practices that were necessary to be governed by I've noticed that the cosmetologists have their own board now, as well as many other professions that were at one time part of the Allied Health Board. But that said, is this discussion, as was stated by the author, by the speaker, was a discussion and was a product that was in the works for many years. I mean, I can tell you right back to the 29th Guam Legislature. And I'm very ecstatic to see that, and we know how, the system, how bureaucracy works, where sometimes we'll find some flaws in it, but at least we have a document to start to identify where those are at. I appreciated the testimony that was provided the night of the public hearing, as well as all the information that has been provided in behalf of the bill since then. I recognize that there are some issues and there are some concerns that have been brought up by individuals within that profession, but I firmly believe this is something that within that board they can be able to handle without any legislative basically intervention into it. This gives them that template, that, for lack of a better term, Bible, if you will, to be able to continue to function. And I'm just glad to see that this, the chapter that is finally closed on this, or this is the attempt to close that this chapter on this, in this area. I applaud the author for her diligence and for her continued work. I think I can speak to the choir. She knows what I'm talking about when sometimes you have to deal, especially with this board. It's not an easy task. Okay, you've got many medical or holistic medicine disciplines, and it's trying to balance these things out. And I'm glad that they finally came up with this product. This has been a long time standing, and I too am asking my colleagues for their support in this piece of legislation so that the Allied Health Board can have something that needed some corrections. Like they said, the last time it was corrected was in 1998. And since then, there's been a lot of advances in technology. Okay? Why do I know this? You know, as a person myself, I take advantage of the utilization of many of the practices within that that are under the Allied Health Board, and I would like to see that, you know, they continue to practice in safe manner, safe means, and a means that can be good for the people of Guam. So with that, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak on this.
Okay, thank you, Senator Blas. Are there any members wishing to speak? Okay, seeing and hearing no other members, Speaker Choi, you're recognized to close.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank my colleagues for their words and support, their attendance at the hearing, and their support today in advance. I'd also like to thank the members of the the Board of Allied Health Examiners. There are many members, so many different professions included. It's really a diverse board, yet they work together, and they have worked very hard on these very detailed rules and regulations and changes to the laws. And so I want to commend them for that work. As I said, it took years, and as the previous speaker referred to, they've been working on this for years, and it's very necessary. It's going to include or improve their ability to improve the standards of practice here on Guam. They did the work to get the consensus of all the different members to these rules and regulations, and the consensus for the increase in fees. And I think that that's important because, and they did a very good job outlining the need to change their fees, and that is so that they will be able to more efficiently handle complaints and independently handle complaints. And I want to commend them. Even recently in the news, there's been articles discussing their investigation into the unauthorized practice on Guam. There is one concern, I'll put it on the record, that we did not address that was brought up at the hearing, and that is, so in the bill we've allowed, we've discussed dry needling and as a part of the Oriental medicine and acupuncture practice. And there was the chiropractors also wanted to include that, but it was not part of the bill when we had the public hearing, so I do hope that the board will further pursue that at their request, and they are able to change or request changes or change the rules and regulations themselves if necessary, according to the AAA process. So again, a lot of work was put into this, and I was happy that not just the board chair, but many members of the board testified on the bill or submitted written testimony in support, and then of course members of the individual practices. So, Suzumasi, Madam Speaker. Oh, I would like to make a motion to add as a supplemental testimony on Bill 356-COR a letter with attachments that I've submitted on December 9 to the acting chairperson of the Committee on Rules, and that is the testimonies that we received after the committee report was submitted. And so those are all attached. They were submitted to the Corps and to the clerks, and if these could just be appended to the committee report and to the journal.
On that motion to append supplemental testimony to the committee report and the legislative journal, are there any objections? Seeing and hearing no objections, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, so I move again to place Bill number 356-36 COR as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture, and further amended on the floor to the third reading file.
On the motion to place Bill 356-36 COR to the third reading file, are there any objections? Seeing and hearing no objections, motion carries.
We're continuing on second reading. We're on bill number 355-36 COR, sponsored by Tina Rose Munoz Barnes. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so I am moving this bill on behalf of the Vice Speaker, who is unable to be here. So I'd like to place Bill 355-36 COR. It's an act to amend Section 5007 of Subarticle A, Article 1, Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to amending the exemption to the policy against advance payments to include the Guam Public Library System. It was sponsored by Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz Barnes, and it's as amended by the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning. And I'd like to speak on
Please proceed.
bill. Bill 355-36 was created in response to the modernization efforts by the Guam Public Library System. The Guam Public Library System plays an important role in our community as gateways to information and culture that provides opportunities for learning and literacy advancement, and that facilitates new ideas that support innovation, creativity, and self-actualization. The modernization of our library system requires procurement of the latest books, journals, research databases, and access to digital publications. Many of these providers are off-island vendors that do not accept Government of Guam purchase orders and require advance payment before provision of goods and services. Bill 355-36 intends to provide the Guam Public Library System greater flexibility to expeditiously acquire the tools they need to expand offerings to the community and to authorize the use of advance payment for the procurement of library books, e-books, audiobooks, digital publications, newsletters, software, and any other publications deemed necessary. So currently, there are only two other agencies that avail of this exemption, and that is the Guam Department of Education and University of Guam. So this would put them in line with these other educational institutions to acquire the much-needed books to advance education on Guam. Siduos Masi.
Siduos Masi. On bill number 355-36, is there any other member who'd like to be recognized? On bill 355, anyone who would like to be recognized? If not, then the sponsor may close. Or Senator Perez, you are recognized.
I thank my colleagues for their, I asked for my colleagues for their support in advance. And I think this is an exciting time for the Guam Public Library System. Under the direction of the new director, he is very engaged in increasing access to and modernizing the public library system to increase literacy as well as just learning in general for the public. And I think it's great that we put our support behind this very important measure. Siduos Masi.
Siduos Masi. On the motion to place bill number 355-36 COR in the third reading file as amended by the committee, are there any objections? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Perez? Oh, Senator, we're now bill 358.
Madam Speaker, I ask that we recess until Monday because we're going to go to committee of the whole, but then, and also anticipate that I may ask for a motion to go back to motion, notwithstanding House rules. All right?
Right now?
No, not until Monday, ma'am. Madam Speaker, let me withdraw that motion to recess because there are some bills to go back to motion. Thank you.
All right, Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move that we go back to motions.
On the motion to go back to motions, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're on motions. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 360-36 COR, sponsored by myself. It's an act to add a new section 51111A8, A9, and A10 to Article 1, Chapter 51, Division 2, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to protecting our air, water, land, and the health of our people from toxic exposure due to open burning and open detonation of hazardous waste, and prohibiting the importation of hazardous waste into Guam. As amended. It's been uploaded to the drive. It's been uploaded to the legislature website.
Senator Perez.
We received a notice that it was filed with the Committee on Rules, and so it should be uploaded shortly, I believe, into the legislature website. For Bill
All right,
360.
so we're not, the clerks inform me they do not see it on the website, but it's been, you received notice that it was cleared by
It
committee?
was
on-
cleared, yeah, it's been filed.
All right. On the motion to place that on the agenda, is there an objection? There's an objection. Is there any other motion, on the motion, notwithstanding the rules, to place Bill number 360-36 COR onto the agenda while it's pending upload? There's been an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion to place the nomination of Candy C. Oklahoma to serve on the Alcoholic Beverage and Control Board.
On that motion, is there any objection to place that on the agenda? Is there any objection? That's been uploaded. Seeing no objection, motion carries. All right. Is there any other motion? Senator Sanagsi?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place on the agenda on the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing, the nomination of Dr. Robert S. Jack to serve as member of the Guam Ethics Commission with the recommendation to do confirm. It is now on the web.
Yes, it is. That's confirmed by the clerk. Is there any objection to placing the nomination of Dr. Robert Jack on the agenda? Any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Is there any other motion? If not, then we will revert to Senator Sanagasi, your motion regarding bill number 358.
But Madam Speaker, don't we have to go to legislative concurrence first?
Oh,
So we can complete the nominees?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll proceed then from motions to legislative concurrence on the nominations. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
So on the nomination of Candy C. Yokohama to serve as a member of the Guam Alcoholic Beverage and Control Board from the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning, to be put on the third voting file, to do confirm, with the recommendation to do confirm.
Is there any objection to that motion to place that nomination on the voting file? Candy C. Yokohama. Any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator San Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing, the nomination of Dr. Robert S. Jack to serve as member of the Guam Ethics Commission with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, any objection to place on the voting file? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We've exhausted the legislative concurrence. We're back to second reading again. Senator San Augustine, you're recognized on Bill 358.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask that we recess. We come back Monday so I can get a hold of the team because we have to go to committee of the whole on that bill. But we also leave some room before we go to the committee of the whole for any possible consideration. Back to motion, ma'am.
All right,
you,
so
Madam
we'll
Speaker.
remain in second reading on Bill number 358, and we will receive a motion on that morning to proceed into committee of the whole if necessary, or other motions. So we're going to recess now until Monday, 9 a.m. Monday at 9 a.m. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, we are recessed until Monday at 9 a.m.